everybody. Welcome back to the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. I am Steve Fretzin. I'm happy you're here. We are going to have a heck of a show for you. Heck. Both are okay, right? With Dennis, we can do hell or heck.
Yeah.
We can say
I'm
shit.
good
We
with
can do whatever we want, right? This is my show.
The president swears all the time, so I think
Oh,
it's
there you
okay
go.
for
All
everybody.
right. So yeah, I don't have a potty mouth like him, but and you know what did it for me was having a son, and my wife and I didn't swear for like 10 years. And then he started swearing, and then the floodgates open, and it's been a swear fest ever since. There's no looking back. And now every time I see that little some bitch, and I'd say, hey, we have a good time together. Anyway. But really great. It's so happy that you're on the show. And I'm just, I think we got introduced through our mutual friend, Chuki Abio, who's an amazing friend and friend of mine and friend of the show over at Vetter Price. But fantastic, man. Let's start off with our quote of the show. And I've read this now 5 times, and I just want to get your take on it because I'm not really sure what it means. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. All right. Help me with that.
So this comes from the science fiction author William Gibson, and the idea is that we sort of are looking out for the future to kind of come back to us. Like it's out there, and we'll eventually get there. His notion is that the future already exists in various forms around us, but it's just not everywhere yet. And so it's kind of a really interesting way to think about the future. So you can apply it to like the early adopters versus late adopters, other things like that. And you say, well, this technology is out there, right? The AI is out there. But my experience of AI, my experience of the internet, my experience of these things is one thing. And it's different than what everyone else has. And so you can say, like, I don't have to wait on the future. I can kind of say if there's these sort of future oriented things, and I think this comes up in the context of your subject matter as well. If I see things out there where there are potential clients, others who are doing future oriented things, I don't have to wait for that to happen and somebody say, okay, the future's here. I can go to that.
Well, so here's my question to you. How far into the future is the world compared to legal?
Well, it's funny, like when I talk to people in the other professions, they will say like, oh, we're so far behind. We're so far behind. You're like, and so they think legal is like a little further along than I sometimes think. But I think the legal system is under a lot of strain, right? Because it is a system, and like many systems, systems are under a lot of stress, especially complex systems. And we try to make these little point solutions, and they cause unintended consequences. So I think that there is what gives me. So I think that law has to react to things. And I think by its nature, because we're more historical, we look backwards, we look to a precedent, all those sorts of things. It tends to be a very reactive profession, and especially in the litigation area, obviously. So I think that I hear more people these days saying, I'm hoping I just kind of make it to retirement or before this AI thing happens, or maybe I can go a little longer before this AI stuff happens. So I don't know that we're that far behind compared to other things. The place I really feel that law is far behind is compared to my experience with the medical profession lately, which is that if I have a question for my doctor, or need a prescription refill or anything, I go to a portal, and I can leave a note, I can get refills, I can schedule appointments, all those things, and that's just a natural thing. But if you say, I go to the law firm, then is there a portal? No, there actually isn't. I had some legal work done by a pretty large firm, and they sent me a bill by email, the invoice, and I was like, oh, great. I'll just like click on the link and go ahead and pay that by credit card today. I wasn't able to do that, right? It wasn't set up. So I needed to do a check, right? And mail that check.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I'm like, oh, I got to dig out a checkbook. Do I have stamps? Do I even have an envelope? Um, and so basically a month or so rolls by, and I got the second, like the second invoice on a bill that I was perfectly prepared to pay on the same
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
So I think it's like the little places where technology is here and is being used in other places where lawyers have sort of that notion of that law is so unique that what we do is so different. You go like, no, we're just talking about getting paid. We're talking
Right.
about getting messages out to people.
It has nothing to do with the law. It has about getting paid, and it has to do about scheduling meetings and like how do we get efficient with our stuff. And for those of you guys who are already enjoying, the first 5 minutes, we've got Dennis Kennedy here. He's the director of the Center for Law, Technology, and Innovation at Michigan State University. He's widely known expert on law and technology. He's the author of Successful Innovation Outcomes in Law. And we had like a wonderful conversation. I don't know, it was last week or something like that, or week or two ago. And I was thrilled to get you on the show and really pick your brain on legal tech because I've interviewed a number of people, but you've been doing this a long time. And not to show your age or anything, but your experiences, if you will. So I really would love to get your take on like the brief Reader's Digest history of like legal tech. Like how did it come about, and then kind of like how has it developed and grown, and in what areas, and how do we get our checks paid, and reaching back into this
Yeah.
into the last couple minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting because it is like the William Gibson of notion. Legal tech was sort of there, but it's not evenly distributed. And so people said, "Could I do something that is maybe like legal research? Could I do something that where I look at information I have? Can I can I track time? Can I do word processing? Can I do these things? And then what's going on in technology?" That could be really useful that would apply to what I'm doing. So if you look at my history, I sometimes say back in 1990 that I developed and the technology was pretty primitive at the time, but it was an amazing application. I created a document assembly program or application, I guess is the better way to describe it, that took the drafting of complex estate planning documents that I was doing at the firm I was at, a largish firm, and took it from being a 6-hour process to basically answering a few questions and generating that sort of editable, really good first draft of documents down to like 5 minutes. And I was so excited when I accomplished that. Then I said, oh, I kind of have this billable hours issue now, that because what's going to happen, I would like to capture like some of the value of what I did, but so it's interesting because then I had to say, okay, what can I do that's kind of higher level? And there's this notion these days where this phrase I really like, that lawyers want to practice at the top of the license. And so I sometimes look at, can a technology help me do that? So what are the things I'm doing that it doesn't make sense for me to do, that computers could do better, than I can, and free up time for me to do higher level stuff. So when people ask me like, oh, I'm not sure what technology to apply or what would be the use of AI, I would say, let's make it really basic. Take a look at what you're doing that you don't like doing, that you either write off the time for or you don't bill clients for because they won't pay you, and see if there are possible applications in there that could work. So when I first heard about generative AI, and I'm teaching now, not practicing, I was like, oh my God, the killer app is cover letters and cover emails, right? So all I do is like, clients don't want it, they don't read these complex letters, but I could use AI, and they don't want to pay me like to write this cover letter or to do a summary. I can have the AI generate it. I can have it generated in friendly language that's suited to them. And they're basically become really happy with me because they go, I got this really great summary and I understand what's going on. And my lawyer didn't even charge me for it, and so that's sometimes how I like to look at technology. Probably what makes me different in my approach to technology is I'm like, okay, this is a tool. What can I use it for? And I'm not saying that I'm not calling myself lazy, but I say like, how can this make things easier for me and give me more time to do that sort of higher level creative work that I would like to do.
Yeah. So I mean, you're, teaching the kids in school these days, and what's going on? I mean, how are they handling not only what's going on in law school, but legal tech? Like what are they teaching us about legal tech?
Well, I think the tricky thing for students, and they play it close to the vest, right? Because they don't want to hurt their chances to be hired. But typically, what they will say is, "I was really surprised that when I went to work at a law firm, typically for summer, like what a big step backwards I had to take
Mm,
in technology, and I had to do things that weren't very efficient, that were hard to do, and didn't use tools that I'm used to doing." Or used to using. So you see some of that, and then also the what I would say, like you can call it social media, but sort of like the communication collaboration layer of technology. They're just so much more familiar with that. Um,
yeah.
and how do I reach out to people? How do I use these different tools? If I have a question, can I just reach out to people who are experts in the field through LinkedIn or otherwise? How can I do those things? If my firm says they want me to do 3 days of training on Windows, which, as we all know, if you do 3 days of training on Windows, by the time you actually have a question come up, you've totally forgotten it all because you couldn't pay attention during that. And they're like, well, if I have a question, I just go to YouTube or I go to Chat GPT, and it tells me how to do exactly what I'm doing. So they're sort of more hands-on. They see the use of technology, but they're a little bit intimidated by lawyers who say, uh, we we don't we don't know what to do with technology, so we're going to keep you, you younger lawyers and students from using this stuff until you kind of prove to us what the benefit is. And so I
Yeah.
think it makes it more hesitant, which is interesting because it is. I think the one thing we can agree on that this newer generation of lawyers is way more entrepreneurial than probably uh, any that's been around for a long time. And so they they would also say, well, maybe I'm better off just starting my own thing, right? Uh,
Yeah.
like why, like is the apprenticeship notion, is it really going to work if I don't feel like I'm learning the things that I would need to represent clients? Or I'm at a firm where they say you can't use AI, or we're not going to touch anything blockchain, NFTs, crypto, cannabis, whatever, like all these high growth areas in law practice.
Well, and I think that hits on the mentorship is maybe down from where it used to be based on COVID and virtual, a part-time, in person and virtual work. And then on top of that, if the technology isn't up to speed, that means that maybe the communication's behind. So there's a number of factors going into how difficult it is now for younger people to really get acclimated to a law firm versus in the past.
Right, and it all takes work, and I think that becomes the tricky thing where you say like, oh, we do have these technologies that could help us, and the remote work could help us in some ways, and but we're concerned about mentoring. So but we need to address that directly. To me, it's like if you say come into the office on these days because in person and mentoring is so important, and I say, you know what, I come in and the partners, and especially the managing partners, aren't in there either, aren't in. Like, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
Like why would I want to do that? And why aren't we doing things that are structured so we take advantage of that? So I had a group of students in my the class I teach at in Michigan, and we did a simulation where they were the innovation committee of a firm, and they needed to come up with an idea of how to use AI as an application. And the idea they came up with, or one of them that was really interesting, was to use AI to kind of gather the mentoring type information, and so that a new associate could sort of in private ask all the dumb questions and get an answer.
Mm,
And to me, like the perfect thing that you never know culturally at a firm is that you want to ask, you don't know who to ask, is what exactly does business casual mean, right? So there are a bunch of things like that. You go like, well, if I could like try the AI thing, or to say like, oh, I'm doing this for this partner, and it says like, oh, here's how they prefer their memos, right?
yeah.
Has to be single space, blah blah blah. Those are the things that you're likely to get wrong, or you'll be afraid to ask. If you can even track down the partner to ask them
It's
that.
but it's so brilliant. So like I'm not a huge Facebook fan and I don't really like Facebook at all, but I'm part of a Deerfield, I'm in Deerfield, Illinois, Deerfield Dads group. And people are saying, hey, does anybody have a roofer? Does anybody who they use to do the solar panels on your home? Or does anybody have a cat sitter or like, or they have you guys tried this new restaurant? Like whatever. The point is like there's not a question you can ask. I mean, I don't want to say too dumb. There probably is something too dumb. I don't want to be
Right.
that. I don't want to be that person, but like there's questions and you decide if you want to respond or not. Not everybody has to respond, but typically 3 to 20 people will respond. And the information that you're getting is so valuable to the decisions that you make to save time, money, and energy on having to research it yourself. You're getting people that are typically, highly recommended. And I'm like thinking, oh my God, that one idea alone within a firm where there could be a central, question answer depository of information could be so useful, or videos, things like that. And maybe that exists in some, but I don't think it
No,
does in most.
it's more rare than you would expect, and then I would go even more basic. So say what people want is exactly what you're talking about. I call it the expert locator, right? So
Mm,
you just want to go like, okay, I'm at a firm, or and I know there has to be somebody in the firm who is interested in this or knows something about it. I would just like to be able to surface them. So I was at Mastercard, big global company, right? And there were a number of occasions where there were like 3 different groups around the world essentially working on the same project, but not knowing the other ones existed, right? um, or you would say, here's somebody who's working on this legal matter and they don't know anything about it and they don't know who to ask. And you go like, well, why don't you ask so and so? And so people would come to me because I had good networks. But I'm like, no, we need this expert locator thing that says, let's use the technology, get the information we have, and just like surface this thing to say like, here are some people who may know something about it. And if you have, it's like LinkedIn, right? So if you have some kind of connection to them, then you say, well, maybe I'm comfortable asking that person, but it advances the cause a little bit.
yeah. I mean, what do you see? I want to ask you about the future and just get your take on it, but let's just talk up to today. What do you think are the top 3 best innovations or changes that have occurred in legal tech? Or
Well,
your favorite? Like we don't have to
I
be,
mean, I
but
just the one thing I alluded to, I think just addressing the payments issue, right?
okay.
So payment by credit cards, gigantic thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's your small, medium, or large firm, and then I don't think we've gotten where we wanted to get with knowledge management or with document automation, but I think there's progress in those ranges. And then the patient portal notion, or client portal,
Yeah.
another big thing that I think has worked. And then I think the whole um, meeting by Zoom, right? Because
Yeah.
if I'm a client, so when I was in St. Louis and doing estate planning much earlier in my career, we reached this point where our wealthiest clients did not want to come to downtown St. Louis, and they lived out in the suburbs. And so we would have to go out there, right? And we write off that time, obviously, and if you're witnessing something, then you have like a couple partners, a couple of associates going out to witness something. Time gets written off. So now you say we offer the Zoom thing, which people are used to. So even elderly clients, because they do use it with their grandchildren and great grandchildren, and you've made things easier, more efficient, and you're able to you just take out that whole thing of like, do I charge for travel time, right? I got stuck in traffic. Do I charge? Took me an hour and a half. Do I charge the client an hour and a half because there's a big traffic jam? You were like, no, it was a Zoom call. It was
Well, wait a second.
45
It depends
minutes.
where it
And
depends. Were you in traffic thinking about the client's
no,
case? Right? Because then you're onto something. Then you're onto something. By the way, Dennis, I want to mention one thing. I don't know if this is ironic or funny or interesting to anybody, but Lawmatics is one of my sponsors. I love Lawmatics and I use it. I was a non-lawyer. I'm using it every day, like all day. And every single client that I work with is on auto debit. They all have filled out my contract. They all have filled in their ACH information. So I take no checks in a month. I take 0 checks except for one, and it's Lawmatics. They send me a check every month. No one else is sending me checks. I think that's sort of funny, but they have made my life so much better through the automations that they've put forth, so that I can, get contracts out, get them back. I've got automations for how I'm keeping in touch. I think that's a big thing, like business development, client retention. How are you staying top of mind and in front of your clients, in front of your network on a regular basis? Most lawyers don't. They just forget and it goes into the rearview mirror. Lawmatics allows you to actually go in and set up automations to reach out every month, every quarter, or whatever you want, with different messages and different, giveaways or whatever you're doing. So I just want to give a shout out to them is because I use that. I really enjoy them, but it's things like that I think people aren't doing enough of.
Yeah, the first, you just remind me, like one of the first presentations of on legal technology I did at ABA Tech Show, back in the previous century, I believe, was on customer relationship management software.
Yeah.
And taking like a standard tool and it's now built into all the practice and matter management tools, but using it as a tool to help you in exactly those things. Let's gather the information about this client. Let's put in there when we last talked to him. Let's have our notes. Let's have the birthdays. Let's have like all this stuff, and like even names. And I was young then, so it wasn't as important. Now that I'm older, it's like, oh, it's so great that I could jump on. I could talk to somebody and say, just like, click a mouse and go like, how is your wife feeling name? And they'll go like, you're up on it. And like, oh, how's your daughter doing at University of Michigan? That kind of thing. And it's just like one of those simple things where you're thinking, oh, this is a great tool and we don't have to call it like legal tech. It's just, we have this thing where we need to keep in touch with clients, and the fact that you have reminders. And the biggest thing with clients is they get upset because you don't talk to them, right? Yeah. Or you don't let them know what's going on. If you just like have this reminder thing that says, oh, it's been a month, do you want to just tell your client how things are going, how things are proceeding, then your client is really happy with you.
Yeah. But think about, if it's all about relationships, right? And you have a way of not only remembering things that you normally wouldn't remember because your CRM, I use a Remarkable 2 pad. Do you know about those? Mm-hmm. Right. And I've gotten a dozen people onto these Remarkable 2 pads. This all backs up to Dropbox, which then I can put into my Lawmatics. Like there's so many uses for it, so that I'm keeping track of everybody and that they, my client has a 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old just got through potty training and it's like diaper free, which is amazing. And great. But now it's the ability to remember things that normally your brain isn't going to hold, and how you bring it back or how you keep in touch. I mean, there's just so much that can be done when you lean into technology versus trying to do it on your own.
Right. And that is the case where if you talk to somebody, even though they're aware that the clock is running and you're asking them something personal that shows you're interested in them, it's not like you're talking about the weather and the football game and this and that, where they're going like, oh, great, I just spent $300 like, talking about the football game, right? So,
well, by the way, as an aside, be careful don't charge people for the for the relationship talk if you can help it. Like, I had a lawyer do that to me. People have heard me talk about this. Like he's like, "How's your son? How's your?" He went on for 15 minutes and then he charged me. And I was like, the next time I got him on the phone, I was like, "Hey, let's get down to it. What do you got for me? How's the contract?"
Right,
Like
no,
I didn't want to.
exactly,
Don't ask me anything
exactly.
about my family because I'm paying. I just paid $100 to hear him a couple to answer questions. So careful with that. But let's sort of wrap things up with your take on kind of where it is today and where you see it in the future, and AI and all that. How do you see it impacting the legal industry as a whole?
So my crystal ball right now is like very muddy,
Mm,
because it's difficult to know, and it's not. There's a bit that's the technology itself, but there's a lot about the regulation and what we're going to do about the technology. So there are legitimate concerns on AI because of what the big tech companies are doing with it. There's legitimate concerns about whether the big tech companies are going to be broken up, you know, and what are the implications of that. There's a huge amount of consolidation in legal tech, um, and and I think that it's easy to. At the same time, there's a huge amount of investment as well. So it's you kind of think about it as I love this Clayton Christensen notion of jobs to be done theory. So I'm like, what is the job that I actually want this technology to do? And I think we're sort of focused on shiny object and what is the technology that I need, and why do I need this technology if everything is just going on, swimmingly for me and nobody's complaining. So I think it's really tricky, but I think it's a time of great opportunity, at the same time. So I don't have a great answer. I sort of say, like, as I always like to say, figure out some problem that you have, some way you'd like to make your life easier that you think a technology might be to help you. Decide that you're not going to learn all of technology. You're just going to learn one thing. So like this summer, I'm focused on AI, right? I mean, I teach an AI and law class, so that's part of it. But AI has just become a really interesting tool for me, and I'm using it in ways that not many people, not many other people are. And it's just become sort of a fun thing, and I sort of
yeah.
see it as a long-standing thing. That could, unless it all melts down and we regulate it out of existence. I see something as, when I retire, I could still be doing AI stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think
and
it's, but
so,
it's, I think, don't you think, Dennis, it's going to probably take away some jobs, but it's probably going to be the lower functioning lawyer jobs, the contracts that get done over and over that are repetitive. That's already happening. So I think that's
well,
really what I'm seeing is it's the big brain, the big brain work that lawyers need to do in transactional and litigation, the problem solving that's in the creativity that's involved in lawyering. I don't think that's necessarily going to get solved, but I think it's a lot of the humdrum stuff that they
well,
might be doing that if it goes away, they're going to lose some hours, but they'll pick them up somewhere else.
well, so that's an interesting question because from my time at MasterCard in house, that you're dealing with these sort of big law firms and tech, and consulting companies. So in ChatGPT, I cooked up this prompt that says, assume that you're in a group of experts at McKinsey, right, the big consulting company, and using the principles that are set out in the books about McKinsey. Here's my business issue, and generate like an 800-word executive summary of what the McKinsey recommendations would be. And it gave me something, right? And so my choice is I could say, well, this could actually be a really useful starting point because otherwise I go to like a McKinsey and they charge me whatever it is, so say $500,000, and they come back with these general recommendations and this advice that we go on to a $25 million consulting engagement. And maybe all I need is that overview to get me going in the right direction. And then maybe I go to them go to a consulting firm or a law firm and say, this is what I care about. I don't care about these other things. You might try to convince me, but here's what I think I care about, and here's what I'm hiring you for. And I think that's an interesting thing. And then on the sort of commodity stuff, there are questions being raised because of the way that generative AI works, because it doesn't produce the same thing each time, that it might not be the best tool for, document drafting, legal research, those kinds of things. And that what we've done, like the existing tools in document automation, e-discovery and other things, might still be a better way to go than this sort of like very general AI. So that's an interesting area as well.
Okay. So
I don't have an answer there, by the
way. Well, again, this is AI, so it's, legal tech. It's always evolving. Let's float though into our game-changing book, and you've got one that we've not brought up on the show before called Co-Intelligence. What is that about? It's Ethan, is it Mollick?
Yeah, Ethan Mollick has been, he's a Wharton business professor, and he's been writing about the practical uses of AI and prompting in education and in business. Very practical. I like the book, and the book just came out on April 2nd, 2024. And so it's new. It's a really great plain language introduction to AI and where we're at with, and talking about its practical implications and where you might use it and you might not use it. I'm actually going to use this book as the foundational book to get my students up to speed in my AI and in the law class next year. I like the book because I agree with so much of it, but we do have some different opinions. But I think it's a great intro, and he does give you some example prompts, and it really kind of takes you through his thinking. And so, if you've been hesitant about AI, and I think it's a good place to start and say, like, this gives me something to think about that I might try.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well,
and it's 4 hours. I think I think it's like 4 hours as an audiobook, either 4 or 6 hours. So
not bad.
You can run it at 1.5 to double speed, make it even a shorter time involvement.
That's for me, that's a there and back from the, into the city of Chicago and out with the traffic. So avoid that at any cost. Dennis, thanks so much. As we wrap up, we want to thank again our sponsors, Lawmatics. As I mentioned earlier, just crushing it for me and for the lawyers that engage in really wanting to automate the way your law practice runs and your marketing. And of course, Get Staffed Up, who's helping law firms all over the country to find those virtual assistants and marketing and administrative and getting all that open time available for you. Dennis, if people want to reach out to you, they want to check out what you're doing, your book, etc., what are the best ways for them to find you?
I'm sort of Dennis Kennedy everywhere. So Dennis Kennedy on LinkedIn, DennisKennedy.com. My blog is called DennisKennedy.blog. I have a podcast called the Kennedy Mile Report on the Legal Talk Network. So it's pretty easy to find me, and I love helping people. So feel free to reach out to me and take a look at what we're doing at Michigan State. I think we're doing some cool things. And some of my students wrote really good papers, and I'm after them to get them published. And one of them already has a paper published within 2 or 3 weeks after the semester ended.
Wow, that's really cool stuff. And I love that. And just thanks again. I appreciate you being on the show. And you and I will keep in touch, I hope. And thank you, everybody, for spending time with Dennis and I today on the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. Legal tech, it's happening all around. We just have to continue to go with it and make sure we lean into it and leverage it. I mean, that's what it's all about. Helping you to be that lawyer, someone who's confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. Take care, everybody. Be safe, be well. We'll talk to you very soon.